Happy Halloween, everybody. And for us writers, it's Nanowrimo Eve, meaning when the clock strikes 12, wherever you are in the world, the stories are going to start. And who knows what bestsellers may come from this month. On today's episode of The Story Detective, we are going to be finishing up the technical part of this series, and that means finishing up Act 3 of Save the Cat. We're also going to be discussing the common traits found in creating most villains, and punching things up in a way that will hopefully put an exclamation point on this series and wind things up properly. That's what's coming up. Stick around. For those who are on my writing buddy list for Nanowrimo, I haven't been able to reach you all. The messenger on the site is pretty messy. So what I've done is create a Facebook group for an area that we can all have a group chat, kind of like in the Camp Nano environment. If this is of interest to you, the link is in the description box below. If you like this video, if you like this series, I hope you'll subscribe. And if you have any questions or thoughts on any of this, leave it in the comment section below, and I'll look forward to the conversations. Act 3 begins with Break into 3. Now, Break into 3 is the culmination of everything your character has learned up to this point in the story. From all of their trials and tribulations, their failures, the B-story characters, everything that's been a part of this story has played its role. And if so, your hero now has a plan of action. They either have new evidence, a new mindset, whatever it is, they are to the point where they are going to ride into battle and hopefully confront whatever the problem is and whoever the villain is and bring things to a logical conclusion. And that's what this beat is all about. It's getting their act together, getting their equipment together, and beginning to move towards the final phase of the plan. Then we move into the finale, and the finale has 5 beats within a beat. So it's a beat with a subset of 5 inner beats that make up the finale. The reason I like this about Save the Cat is you can go on writing book after writing book and try to see what other people say the criteria is for a successful ending to your story. I don't know about you, but I read book after book that said something like, this is where you tie up all of your plot threads. You leave a few things dangling because there's always something more to come, and make sure it's satisfying to the reader. That's great. I think it's common sense that it should be satisfying, and we have an idea, usually by this point, of what our ending should be. The steps to take if you are lost or you're looking for a few tent poles to guide yourself along the way and construct everything around, there's almost nothing. So Save the Cat gives us 5 beats that give us a direction. Again, these things aren't written in stone, but it's nice to have them, because if you have an idea of the steps that they follow in facing that problem from a psychological point of view, that can at least give you the groundwork to build everything else on. You can't have light without creating shadows, and shadows help to define the form within light. And evil is not born, it's created. Several questions you might ask yourself when creating your villain. How does your villain see themselves as opposed to how others see them? Villains usually believe themselves to be the hero, or at the very least believe wholeheartedly in their goal. They, in their mind, are the only one who can or deserve to be the catalyst and victor of the story. What traits do they have in common with your hero? Remember, they are flip sides of the same coin. Can readers empathize with your villain just a little bit? Try to see your villain through their mother's eyes. Your villain may have been held in his mother's arms and thought to be the hope of the world. Conversely, they may have never been held or loved. How they were treated by their family and how they reacted shaped their lives early on. Where were they born? To what culture or class? Did they rebel or embrace it? How have they changed because of it? What are the parts that are still with them? What was it that wounded them most emotionally? The first sub-beat is called Gathering the Team, And it's exactly what it sounds like. This is where the Avengers assemble. This is where in Star Wars the rebels are together in their base with the plans of the Death Star, and they're making plans to fly off and destroy it. This is putting all the facts together. This is getting everyone together who's going to be a part of the plan. Even if your hero is riding solo, this beat has their evidence firmly in hand. It has their training. We know that the tension is mounting here because everything is riding on whatever they've found out, whatever they're going to do next. And I think that is a key thing for this beat, because whatever the plan is, this beat should accentuate the fact that they are putting everything on the line. No matter what they have found, no matter how much training and how good of condition they are in physically, mentally, it's all up for grabs in this beat. Nothing is sure. And I think that uncertainty lends to the suspense of what's to come. And I definitely think that shouldn't be neglected. The audience should be excited at this point, but they should also be a little bit nervous too, because the villain also has their side of the plans, and the hero may not know about that. No matter what they have, they are riding into a situation that they are, in effect, blind on some level. There's an unpredictability factor. And that brings us to point 2, which is executing the plan. They are storming the castle now. This is the part where they're going into battle, whether it's physically or mentally. Think in terms of storming the Death Star, all those ships, how they were defending themselves against the enemy TIE fighters. They were sacrificing themselves because they needed to get somebody into that narrow space where they could shoot the one weak spot of the Death Star in order to destroy it. They were going in knowing what the risks were. It was going to be tough. And at this point, people are getting hurt. People could actually die in this beat because whatever is going on in your story, things are getting pretty tense. Things are getting pretty harrowing. It may be heartbreaking because friends who've been with them the whole time could end up dying in this beat. So what if you're writing a story that doesn't have a whole bunch of action, adventure kind of drama? They could be going into a courtroom and your character could be going in armed with whatever they think is going to win the case, only to find out that the defense attorney has a very strong argument. Whatever evidence they have is being outruled or objected outright, and suddenly things aren't going quite the way they thought things would go. What does your villain fear? Remember that even the biggest, strongest bully, behind all that anger, it began as some type of fear. What part of their past do they keep hidden from everyone? What's in their closet, or wallet, or even their Winnebago? What do they keep close for a reason? Is it embarrassing? Is it a reminder of why they are willing to win at any cost? Who or what do they love more than themselves? If it's a person, are they living or dead? If it's an object or an ideal, how does this affect their choices? Could this be used against them or be perceived as a weakness? What is their kryptonite? What is it that could hurt them physically or emotionally? How do they avoid it or take precautions against it hurting them or being used against them? How would they react if this object or person fell into the wrong hands? And that brings us to beat 3, which is the Hightower Surprise. And that is essentially when your character is going into that courtroom, there's a key piece of evidence they didn't know about. Or there's a witness that no one knew about. There's something there that's going to squash their argument. So no matter how hard they planned, no matter what they've got going on, this is another catalyst moment because it looks like it was all for nothing. The people that died may have died for nothing. And whatever your hero has, their weapons, their physical evidence, it's not enough. Your character in this beat has to dig deeper because it's really about the character themselves. It's the will to go on. It's that inner want meeting the exterior need. It's everything that they've learned that takes that strength from within and without. They need to combine everything here to be able to pull this off. This part of the story can really make or break your character, in my opinion, because I think we've all seen movies where you get to the end and it falls short. It looks like the hero who should have been the catalyst is now coming in with a very generic solution to everything. Or it looks like all they have to do is pull out a bigger weapon and blow something up. And it seems very unsatisfying because that's not coming from that inner deep place of your character. It's okay if the end of your action story, something gets blown up, but it's how it's done. And it's not done by physically pulling the trigger. It's pulling the mental trigger and outsmarting everyone and everything that's against them. How they take that step defines your hero, and it should be everything that they are made of. Everything that you've thought that intrigued you about this character in the beginning has to come into play, and your audience has to feel it right along with you. And that's what beat number 4 is all about. It's called The Big Deep Down, and it exemplifies all of that. It takes your character from the person they were at the beginning to this moment. It's the culmination of all that they've learned and all that they've overcome. Save the Cat says this is something that your hero would never do, maybe even never think of at the beginning of your story because they were a different character then. And this moment is a defining moment that shows that they've changed. This beat is also subtitled The Touch by the Divine beat. And it doesn't mean anything necessarily religious or spiritual, but it is a soul deep level moment, because what your hero does now should touch your audience on a very deep level. A soul touching, gut wrenching moment that they feel for the character. If there was ever a moment to bring tears to your audience's eyes, it would be in this moment. This is the moment where they triumph over everything. And if your audience is relating to your character, they see that change and they need to feel that triumph. And that's where the touched by the divine comes in, because you are grabbing them and really making them empathize with your character. Because if you haven't emotionally energized your audience in this beat, the final beat in this part of the finale is going to fall flat. Could your villain's cause be justified? Is there some spark in all they do which might seem logical, even beneficial, if handled differently or less drastically? Remember that the hero and villain share a single story goal, only their morals and motives vary. Both tackle this goal with the enthusiasm of lifelong dreamers, passionate, possibly to the point of fanaticism. Both are caught in a crucible, the container which traps them, binds them together as the plot heats up. Only one gets to leave with the prize. Does the writer take sides? Yes, both sides. Because if both are not credible, the story will lack balance and conviction. And that brings us to subbeat number 5, executing the new plan. Now Save the Cat says this beat isn't absolutely necessary because there are shorter finales and longer finales. As Jessica Brody puts this, and I like how she puts it, if you plan everything accordingly, this can be the dazzling finish of your story, because at this moment your hero is diving off the bridge or the building without a net. And I think that goes back to my whole live free or die philosophy, because your character could die here. This could be the end. They could martyr themselves. But if you can plan that live free or die moment correctly, it can definitely pull all that emotion that you've built up in your readers in the beat before and really bring them along to that moment where they want to cheer or where they feel that release of energy. Think of the books and movies that you've seen when that moment when the hero finally gets to that point where they are fighting for their lives, outsmarting the villain, whatever clever thing that they're doing here in the end that makes you feel like your adrenaline is surging. This is that moment. And if you planned your story correctly, baited your audience correctly, then what you have here is not only a potential triumph or disaster for your hero, but it's going to either make your story a triumph or a disaster for your reader. And you're also going to be emphasizing the point. What were they fighting for? What did they win for? Was it worth the prize? If they did end up martyring themselves, why did they have to die? What was the point behind all of it? Because that needs to be underlined in this beat as well. Because if it seems like an anticlimax or one of those things where the hero is just pulling the trigger on the bazooka or the secret weapon and everything is blowing up with that final line of triumphant insult that they yell at the villain, that is the stereotypical beat that makes this look like a formula. This should be a brilliant moment, not a yippee-ki-yay moment. Although maybe it is, because sometimes those moments work. The final beat of Save the Cat is the final image. This is where you're looking back at that hero from the beginning, that status quo of life that they were, and now you're juxtaposing that over everything they've done, everything they've learned. If they're going back into their status quo after this is finished, how does it differ from the beginning? Is their status quo completely completely changed, or does it look the same and just they have changed? Maybe now they're sitting in a seat of power. Maybe they're sitting in the chair behind the desk of the position that they fought so hard for. Whatever it is, this is a moment where you're holding up that mirror to the beginning and the end, and they should be radically different. And as Jessica Brody says in this book, the farther apart those images are, the better. And the best endings, in my opinion, the best images you can have in the end is something with a little bit of a twist of irony. That irony is what stays with the reader after they close the book. And you're ending with almost the same question that you've begun with. What happens next? When your readers close the book, you want them to leave with one thing in mind, and that's your hero and what's going to happen in their world, their life. What are the possibilities now that this change has opened? Is the battle between good and evil about winning or achieving a balance? It is a struggle as old as humanity, maybe older. And throughout, mankind has had its trials, wars both globally and culturally, and yet the lessons of each generation are forgotten or trampled by bias and fear. Only one thing survives: our stories. From myths to movies, they are retold. At least the good ones are. So make your words count, your message clear, because it just may be the note inside the bottle which washes upon the shore of some distant future, inspiring the soul of someone you've never met, maybe even an entire generation, or the world. Stranger things have happened, for life is always stranger than fiction. The power is always in the words.